She was afraid for me. We left in the afternoon. How I remember going back into the kitchen to look around. Oh, how my heart hurt. We left and stayed over in Kansas City waiting for a certain train. Papa knew he could ride with him on his ORC card. I was ready to burst into tears at any minute. For Papa's sake, I tried to hold back. It broke my heart to leave our Billy. He was so cute and we all loved him so. Opal was small, and we hadn't really played with her like we had Billy. He was right at the interesting stage. Our trip was sort of a sad one, for Raleigh was homesick too, but had never been away, so he could get a little excitement to cover up. When we landed in Sugar City, a man from the camp, which was a tent city, was there in a spring wagon. So we got started about 5 miles or so. I was so homesick I could hardly talk to Raleigh. We sat on boxes back of the men, in the one seat the spring wagon had. As we drove along, it was bright and sunshine beamed down on us, but it didn't penetrate into my heart. Oh, how I longed for home, Billy, and the baby Opal. Even the chores didn't seem an effort as I sat there. I just couldn't keep the tears back. Bless Raleigh, even though he was aching in his heart, he tried so hard to cheer me up. He was a great one to crack jokes, but didn't bring a smile. Finally, as we were passing by a long wire fence with high posts, the spring meadowlarks were flying all around, sort of following the spring wagon, singing their song loudly. Raleigh started mocking them, which made them sing all the louder. He kept it up, every once in a while, glancing my way, hoping I could stop crying. I tried to stop, for I was so afraid dear Papa would know how sad I was. I looked up into the sky and remembered a verse of scripture Wes's father had once used in his sermons. So as the meadowlarks were singing and hopping from one post top to the other, I made up my mind to try to forget my heartache and do all I could to be cheerful for Papa's sake. For I realized how he must have suffered all those years away from his loved ones. We arrived in the camp. Papa had 2 tents, a larger one for him and Raleigh, which also served as a kitchen, a stove, boxes for chairs, and a smaller one for me to sleep in, real close together. We got started on the harvesting of the sugar beets, which, unlike the regular eating beets, were a yellowish white. We pulled, topped, and put them in piles. It was hard work, but we all worked together and tried to have fun. When they were all finished, I went into town and got a job working for a lady who had a grocery store. Mama didn't write often, but when she did, I know she was deeply concerned about me. I know she prayed that God would protect me. There was so much drinking I was afraid to go out with any of the boys. Raleigh got a job. About the 1st of September, they were all talking of a big day at Rocky Ford, some miles from town. Each year, they had Watermelon Day, also cantaloupes. They piled them up in rows, pyramid style. People came from miles around. It was a big day. It was on this day that I met William Lane, a young man who was here with another group. He had left Oklahoma, where his people lived, and came to Colorado with an old friend of his family, a stockman. William had 2 thoroughbred mares, Bertha, who was the mother, Lady, a young one, both very fine horses. These were his worldly possessions, except in reality, Bertha belonged to his mother. If I remember right, he brought me home from the celebration.
But when Mrs. Delane, the name of the lady I worked for, found I was interested in William, she was disturbed and asked me not to be too friendly with him, as he was a rounder and would get drunk. Twice she knew of him riding through the town, shooting off his gun, and always had the same kind of men to go to dances with. And she told me the dances always broke up with a fight. I went to one, although I had never learned how to dance. Sure enough, there was a fight, and one of this crowd hit another over the head with a whiskey jug. I was ashamed to tell my lady about it, but she did learn of it later. But William seemed to be different than they described him to be. He said he knew a good girl when he saw one, so I thought they were too severe in their feeling against him and kept on seeing him. I went back out to camp with Papa and Raleigh soon after. There was a family of Deans, a mother and 2 sons, also a married daughter living in the tent village. Elmer had been married and separated. He had 2 daughters. One the wife took, the other, Hazel, he had turned over to his mother to raise. She was 10 years old. The father was a telegraph operator, at this time still back in Joplin where they all came from. They had lived by our dear old Grandma Woodruff. Elmer was going to California to work, had a position in a small town, South San Francisco. So this was being considered. We hadn't cleared much on the beat contract. Mama was worried about me. She knew Raleigh could go along with Papa, but she didn't want me to go, so she got a friend, a lady who was a maid, about 60, a good friend of Alice, to stay with the family, and Grandma Woodruff sent some money for her car fare. Grandma had been working too hard, so Aunt Dora wrote she was failing. This was a worry to poor Mama. She arrived in Sugar City in early December and found William and I engaged, though no plans had been made. He had a tent he lived in, but not much in it. He hadn't any material things to offer, but he did have love and protection, and it was what I was in need of right then. But when Mama got well acquainted with the situation, she was much disturbed. So full of wisdom. She tried to explain how different we were. William was interested in things I had never had any experience in. Lula, you are a home girl, and he is not one to ever confine himself to anything other than his kind of life, and you will not fit into it. When he found that Mama was against our marriage, he had rather have me than all the cattle and stock ranches in the world, are his exact words. Mama liked him very much, and he told her if he couldn't have me, he didn't want anybody. Mama said no more, but as my mind goes back, I know she had a heartache. She had no money, but made me 2 nightgowns and a couple old comforts and put new covers on them. This was all she could do, but it didn't trouble me. All I could think of, she would have wanted to have me be home, and even if I did want to, there was no money to take me. Papa was going to California. Elmer Dean had spoken for a job for him switching for a packing house, Western Meat Company, owned by Swift Company. So he wanted to go and later get his family out there. Grandma Dean and her family also were to follow as soon as Elmer could arrange to help them financially. Her married girl and husband were helping too. Sometime the middle of December a telegram came from Joplin that Grandma Woodruff was very low and wanted Mama to come before she passed away.
So, Papa and Mama left. He took her on his ORC card, Order of the Railroad Conductors, left Raleigh staying with the man he had been working for. I went to stay with a lady who had a daughter that William had been running around with for a long time, but I don't think they ever planned to marry. She was kind to me, for I had no money to pay her. I worked hard, and she said that I more than paid her. She did the outside work. Can't remember, but I think it was restaurant work. She did all she could do to get me to wait and to think over the idea of my marriage, but I kind of thought she had her own daughter in mind. I learned later, though, I was wrong. The girl already had a friend and was soon engaged. She had known William longer than anyone around there. William and I got married January 1st in La Junta. A young couple went along. This friend, Jim Alfred, the stockman, was a few miles near another small town. I told William if he wanted to go and work for him, we would go, as we had no money, and there seemed so little around there he could find to do. But I guess his promise was too fresh in his mind, and he told me he would find other work. I remember how wonderful he was when Mama was getting ready to leave. He tried to put her mind at ease. He told her not to worry, he would take care of me. Then I got a letter from Mama that Grandma had passed away. It was the evening before our marriage. I did not feel sorry for myself. It was for my dear little mother, for Grandma. Martha Tipton Woodruff had been so close to all of us. Then, to add to this sorrow, Aunt Dora went into a daze. She had lost everything she had, for she worshipped her old mother. After the funeral, the rest of us were all busy around the house. She wandered away. They didn't think much about her until night, and they started making inquiries, but no one had any answer. Then in a few days a report came that she was seen at the grave. She was stretched out on top of it. The ones who made the report only knew that it was a woman in a new mound and didn't know who it was. When they went out, she was gone, just disappeared. In those days, it was difficult to find people. The search went on, but Mama had to return to the family. And Papa took her home and left immediately for California and his new work on the switch engine. But she, Dora, was never heard of. Most of her friends felt she suffered from a case of amnesia and kept straying. Aunt Abby returned to Kansas City and later moved to Liberty, Missouri, where she passed away about 1936. Uncle Will Woodruff later got a case of leg injury, got blood poisoning, had his leg taken off, and died later while still in Joplin. William did odd jobs and would not return to his friend's stock ranch. He never seemed to want to. April 1st came. His folks wrote soon after we got married and begged us to come home. William had written several times to them and told his mother he had the best girl in the world. So, about April 1st, his father came and said, Mother Lane was so anxious for us to come. And Dad Lane also said he could use William at his livery barn. He gave us enough to put a top on our wagon, and then he hurried back to Newkirk. We left Sugar City in a week or so. We were on the road 18 days, camped at night, and slept in the covered wagon. I felt bad to leave Raleigh. I still knew he would be all right. He was soon to join Papa.
When we arrived in Newkirk, his mother was so happy, and a love that never died came into our hearts for one another. I had just left mine, and she proved to be a real mother to me, and it lasted as long as she lived. She was so dear to me. She was pregnant, to be her 7th child. I had lots of vitality, and I saw how much I was needed, so it was a pleasure to help. The washings were heavy, lots of cooking and light bread to make 6 loaves every other day. Now Mother would sit and do mending and take it easy, for it was so good to help her. She was run down, so many children born close together. She looked thin and tired. On June 20th, 1902, our Gladys was born. When she got up, she was never strong. She nursed the baby, so that took her strength. We stayed there, got our board, and that was all. When Dad bought material for a dress or stockings and shoes for the rest, he always bought for me, like one of his own. But William wasn't satisfied. He had in his mind to draw a salary of his own. So we rented a 2-room house not far from there. And I still went and helped with the work, but she kept failing, and then took a severe case of rheumatism, and I stayed there and took care of her and the baby. She was now bedfast and couldn't walk. So we again stayed until she was up on her feet, though she had to use a crutch. We took her to Sulphur Springs. I stayed there and took care of her for a few weeks. It did help her, but she was still weak after she returned home. In late September of 1902, Mama wrote that in December they would go to California, and before they left they wanted me to come home, for she felt it would be so far I couldn't get out to California. William was wonderful. He got the $25 round-trip ticket, and I went back home a short time before they left in November. I think it was good to see the old home once again. Alice was on their 5 acres a few miles from there, where they had located soon after their marriage. Bessie was 18, a sweet young lady. Opal the baby was 2 that October. I was glad to see our Willie again. He was so cute. But after the first week, I got real homesick for William. Oh, he was so very good and kind to me. I couldn't stay away any longer. No, it was just 2 weeks from the day I left Newkirk, I was back with him. I told myself then I could never go away and leave him, for he meant so much to me. When I got home, he was on a deal to go down to a tent town, Kansas City, and do draying from a town 10 miles from there. I didn't care, for I'd have come to the far ends of the earth with him. We went and were there before the Christmas holidays. He went on the long haul, groceries, sugar, and flour, especially was his loads mostly. He would leave about 3 one morning and get back around dark the same evening. It was hard, but we were young. I did little jobs, like I did laundry for a few men who wore the heavy underwear. I liked that, as it wasn't particular, but it helped along, and I loved having something to do. Our tent was on the ground, the sand was deep. We had a table, stove, 2 boxes put together to make a place with shelves for our folded clothes. Also, some built up with about 3 yards of muslin for a front covering gathered up on a string to pull back to open. This was our cupboard. I found something to do all day, just waiting for evening when William would be home. We had good times. The folks were nice in camp. Most of them were there helping build up the town. Many stores were being erected. There was a doctor who had an office, a small drugstore, and so on. But the town was growing fast. It was across the railroad track from where this tent settlement was located, a 10-minute walk.
It was raw country, and of course lots of snakes still lingered around the edge of the area the town was in. I was terribly afraid of them, so was constantly on the lookout for them when I went anywhere. But one evening, just getting dark, one crawled into our tent and was under my table. I was getting supper and waiting for William to come home from his long trip. I heard a noise and thought it was water dripping from the pan on a paper sack. I reached down to get it, and I was struck in the left hand. I seemed to realize it was a snake. I went over and got a small lamp already lighted and held it down, and there he was, still coiled. I went out to find a man to help kill it. All the women started screaming out, scared to come. I finally got a boy to come, and the 2 of us killed him with a hoe and axe. The boy stretched it out, and it measured 7.5 feet. The next day it was pronounced a copperhead by the people who know. I knew I must get a doctor, so I started. As I just got over the tracks, I could hear one of the women neighbors screaming to William. He was just getting in. But she was so excited, all she could say was, "Go catch Lula!" And she heard heart trouble, and we were all afraid she would have a spell. When William found out, he left his team standing and came to overtake me before I got to the doctor. By now, my arm was black to my elbow. The doctor told him to give me a drink of whiskey he gave us every hour. They put me into bed and kept me under this for 24 hours. It drove the poison out. I was strong and healthy. In a couple of weeks, I was fine again. We went to little gatherings in homes and had box suppers. Also, a masquerade ball in the large hall in the town. I got first prize, being a queen of clubs. I certainly didn't get it on dancing, as I was a very poor one. Only at square dancing. I wasn't bad. Oh, I was so very happy. This was along in September 1903. Here's where we met another couple who lived next in the storefront row of old stores turned into living quarters. I think our rent was $5 per month. No utilities, still burned oil lamps. William bought me a 2-burner gas plate, and oh, what a luxury. I also had the wood stove to bake my light bread. We had lots of fun with our new friends, Mara and Grace Ward. We would have little parties together, and both of us wanted a baby. We each desired a girl. Once we heard a pair of twins to be let for adoption. We got a horse and buggy and drove into the country near Newkirk to see the 4-month-old babies. When we got there, it was a boy and a girl. We both wanted a girl, so neither one of us took one. Each didn't want to take this girl and the other not to take any. I really didn't much want to take someone else's baby anyway, so I wasn't too hurt about it. But we went right on together, having lots of fun. Never went away from home much, just found things at home to enjoy. I continued to help Mother Lane in her work. She was still on crutches. One, rather. She leaned on it and worked so hard, often carried Gladys, who got terribly spoiled when she was so frail. But we all loved her. She was so dear.
Late 1904, William got sick of the setup again and decided to get out on a farm. So we rented 100 acres out 8 miles from town, got together everything we could in the way of farm implements, and moved out. Had a cow, and he got a calf somewhere in a few months. We were putting in wheat, and I had a small spot for a garden. There was a large, lovely 2-bedroom house, of course no bathroom, but it was wonderful. I sent away and got a pair of lace curtains and put them up on a heavy card, and oh, was I proud of them. Didn't have much furniture, but oh, it was nice. We were so happy to be out there. I would get up at 4, go out and feed the stock, milk the cow, and then come in to awaken William. He slept so sound. The stove would be roaring to warm up the big kitchen and the bedroom where we slept, just joining the kitchen. I wanted everything just right before he got up. Often I would have to put a cold wet wash rag on his face to rouse him. I went out often and drove the team or dropped corn along ahead of the plow for him to cover. Grandma Davis came to spend a few months with us. She was wonderful. Started some flowers growing, got some hens setting. When she went back to Aunt Maggie's, she had a lot of chickens running around, and we were doing all right, although not taking much in the way of a big profit, but at least we were happy. Along in the fall, here comes his dad again with a big idea for William. He was going to ship horses to Kansas City, so wanted him to go on the road to buy. Well, everything on the farm stopped. Off they went, left me there on the farm to keep things together. Oh, but I cried, especially at night. A week or so later, dear old Mother Lane had someone drive her out. Alice was old enough to keep things going at home. They had an Irishman, a fine fellow, managing the livery barn. Well, Mother, God rest her soul, stayed with me until William came home from one of his trips. She told him in plain talk how wrong he was to let his dad take him away and leave me alone. It was this fall, 1905, Bessie wrote me she was getting married to a boy by the name of Harry Yeager, and also I learned Mother was pregnant again. She had a miscarriage in between time. Oh, my heart ached for her, not strong, and must go through all of that again. Harold was born this fall, 1905. Our stock was all turned out in pasture, and the furniture what we had was all put in one of the empty rooms, and I was going to stay with Mother. But William meantime had learned of a restaurant with 4 extra rooms for bedrooms. One to rent out was vacant, located in Winfield, Kansas, a lovely city. It was a railroad center. 2 roads ran out from there, and this restaurant was across from the depot and would be supported by the railroad men. He hurried out to the farm and asked me if I wanted to go and open it up. It would mean hard work. I thought anything would be better than being separated, so we moved our things up there and found every bedroom furnished with carpets, a bed and dresser, washbowl, and a large 2-gallon pitcher in every bowl. We rented 2 of the bedrooms to a couple of our regular boarders. I always got up at 4:30 and took care of the breakfast rush. We had a man cook for a week or so, then got another man who was an ex-race horse jockey. I could wait on the tables for the 2-hour early comers. Then at 7, William would get up. He kept open till about 10:30 at night to sell cigars and chewing tobacco. I really can't remember of any cigarettes. He had smoking tobacco in small bags to make cigarettes, and at that time, the ground bag tobacco was used for pipes mostly. I do not remember of ever seeing them roll cigarettes. We did well, put money in the bank each end of the week's run.
It was hard work, but we were young, and after a night's rest we were always ready to start a new day. William was 23, December '05, and I caught up with him in March of 1906. We had very few women. Most all of our patrons were men, as the depot was quite a distance from the business district. All of them ate with us. We had about 10 regular boarders. The rest were transients. In April of this 1906 year, the terrible earthquake and fire gave us much worry, as my folks were only 10 miles out of San Francisco. It was several days before we got a letter from Bessie telling us no one in the family was injured. It was about the middle of the year when William and the ex-jockey got interested in racing. I don't remember if the cook went out first or not, but I do remember the lady who was waiting tables for the heavy dinner run had to go into the kitchen to take over the cooking. She had a 12-year-old daughter who filled in with me in the front. I had to be at the cash register so often that made it terribly difficult. As soon as Mother Lane learned they had gone out, she came right up the following week, and what a help she was. She didn't have to use a crutch, but limped pretty bad. She made beds and helped to fill the kerosene lamps. They were a trial. All the chimneys had to be washed each morning. There were about 12 lamps of different sizes, all to have their burners cleaned and wicks trimmed. The races didn't do much good, but when William came back, our trade had fallen off until we had less regulars, for we couldn't do justice. The lady was less experienced, so our food on the menu wasn't like it was when the man was cooking. Mother Lane stayed as long as she could, but Harold was a baby and they needed her. So soon after she left, William came home, but the railroad cook never did return to cook again. When Grandma Davis learned I was trying to hold on, she came to be with me. She knew there were mostly men, and she came more as a moral support. But oh, how good it was to have her. Charlie was on the farm at Aunt Maggie's, and he was happy with her son, Wilford. We tried to build up our trade in August, but I found I was pregnant. We had fully made up our minds we were never to have any children, so it was a big surprise. What money we had saved was about gone, and we couldn't get any amount out of his horses. Our other horses, Bertha's Lady, were down at Newkirk. We had one called Perhaps, a colt out of one of the old horses. He was a stallion. William had picked up a rubber-tired buggy with fringe all around the edge on the top. I enjoyed going out in the afternoon. I only had it for a short while, as William was badly in need of money, so he sold both the horses and buggy, but they had bred Lady, and she had a little mare colt. Later on, William told me I could have it for my own. It was down with the folks at Newkirk. We had to vacate the restaurant building, for I wasn't able to work in it. Then they also had informed us they were going to sell the property.